Yeah. Good afternoon to all the viewers and welcome to yet another session of What If? My name is Virpia and today we will be talking or discussing what if your employees are working remotely, what are the safety challenges in respect of the remote working arrangement. That will be the topic in my initial discussion, discussing workplace safety of your remote working employees. But since our last discussion, or since advertising this session, the President of South Africa announced that we will be going down to level 2, and recently we have received the level 2 regulations that were published, and we have noticed through our clients, and you might have seen the roads also getting busier, that employees are starting to return to work. So I think it's best that I also discuss the level 2 regulations, specifically insofar as it relates to employees returning to work. In other words, employers that has reopened their businesses under level 2 and now are allowing employees to come back into the workplace. So I'll start off just by touching or talking about the workplace safety or the safety challenges of employees working from home, in other words, the home office, and thereafter we will talk about the level 2 regulations. For those of you who have joined us before, you will know that we have touched on this topic a couple of weeks ago. So if you want to recap on that, please feel free to view our video in that regard. So the question we asked in our previous session was simple. The duty to provide a safe workplace, is that duty extended to a workplace that is now the employee's home office? In other words, as we've mentioned before, the Occupational Health and Safety Act requires employers to provide you with a safe workplace. Is that obligation extended to a home office? We looked at the definition of a workplace in terms of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and it defines, the Occupational Health and Safety Act defines a workplace as any premises or place where a person performs work in the course of his or her employment. And that is wide enough to include a home office. So what does this mean? It simply means that the definition of a workplace is extended to employees working from home, and therefore you as the employer, you remain obliged, as far as reasonably practicable, to ensure that these employees that are working from home are working under safe conditions, free of risk to their health. So this is not old news, we have discussed it before, but we have received numerous queries in this regard. How do we, Virpia, you are telling us that we need to ensure that my employee's home office is safe. How do we do that? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. As I've mentioned, we have discussed it before, and there is a recorded video on our Facebook page in this regard. But just in summary, as the employer, how can you ensure a home office is safe? One, you need to inspect your employee's home office. Please arrange with your employee, give reasonable notice. Don't simply just arrive at his or her front door and say that you are demanding an inspection. Arrange it beforehand, conduct the inspection, and after your inspection you can then conduct a risk assessment. We have spoken about risk assessments since the start of COVID-19. It's been in the Occupational Health and Safety Act since day one, but it has become very relevant in the COVID context. But you also need to conduct a risk assessment in regards to an employee's home office. We have compiled an employee safety checklist that you can issue to your employee that's working remotely. It just confirms certain aspects and it will assist with your risk assessment. In other words, identifying risks and thereafter implementing measures to mitigate the risks you have identified. You will then, in all probability, have to issue a policy or make some contractual changes to the employee's contract, or at least some form of an agreement. In other words, you will implement contractual changes or policy, as well as provide relevant instructions in this regard. Simple example, I instruct you, employee, it's an instruction, you are not allowed to work at any other workstation but the identified workstation in your house. Yes, you are allowed to work perhaps in the living room instead of the study, but the point is you can't work at Wimpy or McDonald's or Vida E because we have not done a risk assessment there. So you must work at your designated workplace. And then finally, simply just make the employee aware of the hazards that you have identified, and then also make the employee aware of the measures that you will implement to mitigate the risks. So that is in short. To the viewers, again, you can view the video on this. We have spoken about it, but I think I want to spend most of our time in discussing the Alert Level 2 regulations that was recently published, because it is applicable to workplace safety and the challenges that it might create. So, again, just to recap, we are in a situation now where some businesses have been closed as a result of the COVID pandemic, as a result of the regulations and the rules and regulations that have been published. We know tourism, for example, we know bars, we know taverns, we know hotels. All those businesses, though that specific industry, it's been closed, so the employees were not able to work. Since Monday, or Tuesday at least, these businesses were allowed or are allowed to open, so these employees are returning back to work. The question is, can I simply just open my business and allow my employees back into the workplace? You can, obviously, but you must ensure that there are proper precautions taken or put in place to ensure that these employees are safe in the workplace, so that we don't have a second wave of COVID-19. So I'm going to unpack the provisions of this new regulation. Majority of it is old news, so I just want to rehash it, but there are some aspects of it that is important, specifically for employers that are opening up their workplaces under level 2. So you will recall from previous regulations, previous directives, that the idea is to ensure social distancing, and this new regulation just states, again, it repeats, it highlights, it reiterates that in order to achieve social distancing and limit congestion in public transport as well as at the workplace, if you employ more than 100 employees and these employees work in a congested area, one floor, or it's an open plan office, whatever the case may be, you as the employer must, where possible, make provision for minimizing the number of employees at the workplace at any given time. Question again is, how do we do that? Most of you might know because you've already implemented it, but you can rotate your staff, you can work staggered working hours, so your starting times would differ department to department. You can even implement a shift system, etc., or continue to allow employees to work remotely. I think from my side, I've been coming to the office since level 4. I can already see this week that traffic has significantly increased. So I would be very glad if employers would continue to allow their employees to work from home, even if it's just from a traffic point of view. So that is what the regulation states. You must continue to look at measures how you can minimize the number of employees that are at your workplace or in the workplace at any given time. Now you would recall, if I can just think of the most recent and relevant directives or directions, definitely it's the consolidated COVID-19 direction on workplace safety. Don't throw that document away. The level 2 regulation states that everything that is in that document continues to apply with regards to, or even in level 2, and then also level 3 and level 4, the regulations must be read with, or level 2 regulation at least, must be read with level 3 and level 4 regulations. We have discussed in these sessions, or I think it might have been our first or second What If session, we have discussed vulnerable employees, and again level 2, the regulation highlights and repeats the point that if you have a vulnerable employee in your workplace or in your employ, you must accommodate or at least implement or adopt special measures to ensure that that employee is safe, or at least limits the employee's exposure to COVID-19. We can spend the next half an hour talking about vulnerable employees, employees older than 60, or an employee with a comorbidity, hypertension, diabetes, immunocompromised, etc. If you have any questions in that regard, view our previous videos, or you can contact us directly. But just to repeat this, Level 2 regulation continues to place the obligation on employers to ensure that you implement special measures. You must make sure that the safe return of this employee is facilitated. 1, and 2, you must implement special measures once that employee is in your workplace to at least limit the infection or exposure to COVID-19 infection of that employee. Yes, there's questions, but what is special measures? What if there is, I can't implement special measures? Those are all relevant, and as I've said, we've addressed it in our previous videos. If your business or your company is in the construction, manufacturing, or financial services, and you employ more than 500 employees, the new or the Level 2 regulation also states that you must adhere to the appropriate sector or workplace arrangements to address the following. 1, you must provide or arrange transport to your employees coming to work, and if that is not possible, you must then consider staggered working time, rotate your staff, etc. You should also consider to stagger the return to work for your employees to ensure workplace readiness, as well as to avoid traffic congestion during peak travel times as a result of the return to work. You must also, this is not new, it's been there before, screen your employees daily for symptoms of COVID-19, as well as refer the employees who display symptoms for medical examination and testing where necessary. And then finally, you must submit this data that you've collected during the screening and testing process to the Director General of Health. Just keep in mind that once you collect, which is in terms of the Protection of Personal Information Act, POPIA, that is processing of personal information, please make sure that in this process, not only in this regard with regard to submitting it to the Director General, but in general, collecting and storing personal information, it must be compliant with POPIA, which is, since 1 July, it is in effect. In fact, one can even argue that this health information is special personal information, which has additional requirements that the processing of it must comply with. So any advice in that regard, please feel free to give us a call. You would also recall, those of you who've kept an eye on the previous regulations or the directives, the appointment of a compliance officer, or specifically a COVID-19 compliance officer. Level 2 again reiterates and highlights this point, and it states employers must designate a COVID-19 compliance officer that must do the following, or at least oversee the implementation of a plan for the phased-in return of employees, and also oversee the strict adherence to the standards of hygiene and health protocols relating to COVID-19 at the workplace. Again, not new, it's been there, and we'll talk about this plan that was referred to, that I've just referred to. So if you have only reopened your business this week, you must have a plan in place. If you have gradually reopened your business, I'm sure that back then when you reopened, you implemented a plan that was required in terms of the Level 4 or Level 3 regulation. But if you have recently opened your doors, please make sure that you have a plan in place. For those of you who don't have a plan, who has already opened, please make sure that you implement a plan now. There is the plan. We'll talk about the phased-in return of your employees to the workplace, and it must correspond with a template that is contained in the regulations. The copy of the regulation, or Level 2 regulation, that I received does not contain Annexure E, so just keep your, you can consult the previous regulations. There is an Annexure E, and that you can use as a template for this specific plan for the phased-in return of your employees to the workplace. There are certain information that must be contained in this plan, but as I said, you can definitely use that annexure as your template. Just in summary, what information must this plan contain? 1, it must contain information on who the employees are who are permitted to come to work, right? It must also contain information what the plans for the phased-in return of the employees to the workplace are, what health protocols are you putting in place to protect employees, and it must also contain details of the appointed compliance officer or COVID-19 compliance officer. In addition to the viewers, this is important, what is additional to this level 2 regulations is a table that was inserted, and the table is contained in, I think it's the last or second last page of the regulation, and it basically just states that all persons, it states who can work. It states that every employee can now work, just as long as there is strict adherence to health and safety protocols. And then it provides a list of the areas that, well, at least industries that cannot open or reopen, such as nightclubs, such as obviously international traveling for leisure purposes, etc. But majority of the economy, as we know, has reopened. So please have a look at Table 3. It does contain additional information that you can be on the lookout for. And yeah, that is in short what the Level 2 regulations contains. Important again is that it is somewhat a rehash of the previous regulations, but if you are now reopening your business during Level 2, it's important that you comply with the Level 2 regulations. You must implement this plan and all the other aspects that is contained in the previous directives or directions, conducting a risk assessment, ensuring an employee is provided with a mask, ensuring that social distancing is complied with, ensuring you provide hand sanitizers, ensuring that you create awareness, you train employees, sensitizing on the topic. All those requirements will remain, but Level 2 now has just rehashed and highlight the most important parts thereof. So, that being said, I thank you for your time this afternoon. We will be back probably in 2 weeks' time. Please keep a lookout on our Facebook page for the invite to the next session. I encourage you, or I invite you to suggest or make recommendations with regards to topics. So if you have something that you want information on and you want us to talk about or speak on, please feel free to send us a message. You can send it to us on Facebook, or you can simply just pop us an email. Our details are contained in our, or at least on our Facebook page. So yeah, with that being said, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I hope you enjoyed the rest of your Thursday. Thank you.